The villages of Juniper Hill, Cottisford and Frankford, situated in North Oxfordshire, have been associated with author Flora Thompson and her trilogy Lark to Candleford since the book was published in 1947, even more so now due to the successful BBC TV series of the same name. Flora was born to Albert and Emma Timms on the 5th of December 1876 in Juniper Hill, which she later rechristened in her books as Lark Rise. Flora went to the school and church in Cottisford and later to Frankford, where she worked in the sub-post office. The end house was where the Timms family lived from 1877. The house would have been much smaller in those days, and with large families as the norm, it would have been very cramped, to say the least. The Timms had 8 children, of whom 4 died very young, but there would have been 6 children living in the house at one time. One of the well-known characters from the book was Queenie, and she lived here with her husband, Twister Macy. Queenie in particular was a great attraction to the children, as she was a lace-maker and beekeeper. Sugar was very expensive in those days, so keeping bees for their honey was very common. There is a wonderful section in the book talking about her tanging the bees. This involved pursuing the swarm when it rose whilst banging a spoon on a coal shovel. She said that this was to ensure that the bees settled in her garden and that she had a legal right to them. The village of Cottisford, Flora's Ford Low, lies about a mile south of Juniper Hill. This is where Flora went to school and to church each Sunday. The little church of St Mary's dates from the 13th century and was much restored in 1861. This is where Flora would have come with her brother Edwin every Sunday. They would sit here, where there is now a plaque to Flora and a memorial to those who died in the First World War. At the bottom of the list is Edwin Timms, who was killed at the Battle of Somme in 1916. The church is well loved and tended by the villagers and has become a place of pilgrimage for lovers of Lark to Candleford. Cottisford School was built at the crossroads and opened in 1856 to cater for about 45 pupils and 1 teacher. The school consisted of 1 large classroom and was only heated by a small stove, so must have been pretty cold in the winter. In 1891, when she was 14, Flora moved to Frankford to work in the sub-post office. Frankford, Candleford Green in her book, is the largest of the 3 villages. Tucked away at the bottom end of the village is St Michael and All Angels Church, which dates from the 12th century and has undergone many changes since then. The church was largely rebuilt in the 19th century, and in 1831 the present stone tower was built to replace the wooden one. The beautiful pew ends were individually carved after the First World War by a local man, Charlie Freeman, who lived on the green. Another local man, John Rogers, who was a carpenter, built the fine casing for the organ. The 2 gargoyles on the pillars date from the 14th century. They show the men making faces at the women, probably a stonemason's idea of humour. The plaque on the wall commemorates Flora's time in the village and was unveiled in 2010 by actress Linda Bassett, who played Queenie in the BBC series. John Whitten was the postmaster and blacksmith. He was an excellent craftsman and made the gates to the churchyard. You can still see his name on the latch. John had died shortly before Flora arrived at the sub-post office. John's wife, Kezia, Dorcas Lane in the TV series, took over both businesses, which was most unusual at the time. As Flora later wrote, Mrs. Whitten had the most observant eye and the keenest brain of anyone I have ever known. Kezia was a rather large lady, some 18 stone, and when she died in 1898, she was in a bedroom upstairs, and given her size, it was found impossible to take her down the narrow stairs. This meant that the window had to be taken out so the coffin could be lowered down a ladder. You can still see where the window was bricked up again. She, with her husband and son Alexander, are buried in the church graveyard. The AA sign at the front of the house was put up about 1926, when it was common practice to put these signs up on village forges. The post office moved to other premises in Rectory Lane in the early 1900s, and the forge closed in the 1950s. The house is now a private residence. Flora worked in the post office until 1897, and after that she moved away from Oxfordshire and rarely returned. In 1903, she married John Thompson, another post office worker. They continued to work in post offices in various places, and in 1928 moved to Dartmouth in Devon. It was here that she started to write the trilogy Lark Rise to Candleford, which was published in 1945. The initial run of 5,000 copies was pre-sold, which was a great achievement at the time, and Flora lived just long enough to see the success of her work. She died in 1947 and is buried in Dartmouth. Many years previously, Flora had met an ancient gypsy woman when she was wandering in the woods and was rewarded with a prophecy for helping her find some medicinal wood sage. The gypsy had said to Flora, "You are going to be loved by a lot of folks. Strangers will become friends, people all over," and waved her hands over to the horizon. Little did she know then how true that would become.